Imagine waking up one morning only to find out that you've been arrested, but you don't know why. No explanation, no clear crime, no one to help you, just a giant, confusing system that seems impossible to fight against. Sounds terrifying, right? Well, this is exactly what happens in the trial by Franz Kafka. A book that feels like a nightmare but is strangely close to reality. It's a story about a man caught in a mysterious and powerful bureaucracy, struggling to prove his innocence when he doesn't even know what he's guilty of. It all begins on a normal morning. Joseph K., a respected bank officer, wakes up in his boarding house, ready to start his day. But something is different. Two strange men are in his room. They tell him that he is under arrest. Joseph is confused. "What crime have I committed?" he asks. But the men do not answer. Instead, they act as if everything is normal. They eat his breakfast, talk down to him, and refuse to give him any real information. Joseph is not taken to jail. He is free to go to work, but he is warned that he will have to face trial soon. Yet, no one tells him what his crime is. No evidence, no reason, just a mysterious case against him. And so Joseph K.'s nightmare begins. He will try to understand the law, defend himself, and escape the invisible hands of the system. But can he? Joseph K. tries to continue his day as if nothing has happened. But deep inside, he feels uneasy. He does not understand why he has been arrested. He was not taken to a police station. He was not given any clear reason. And yet, he was told that he must face a trial. The thought stays with him even as he goes to work at the bank. At first, he tries to convince himself that it must be some mistake, something that will clear up soon. Maybe it was just a joke, or maybe those men were not serious. But as time passes, he realizes that this is real. The more he thinks about it, the more confused he becomes. How can someone be arrested without knowing the crime? How can there be a trial if no one tells him what he has done wrong? Days later, he receives a message. He must appear for an inquiry at a certain place on a specific day and time. No details are given, just an instruction. Joseph is both nervous and curious. He does not want to take this seriously. But something inside him tells him that he should go. On the given day, Joseph arrives at the address. He expects a court, a serious place with judges and lawyers. Instead, he finds himself in a small, crowded apartment. The air inside is heavy, and the room is filled with people. Some of them seem to be officials, but they do not wear uniforms. Others are just sitting there watching. The atmosphere is strange. It does not feel like a courtroom, yet he knows this is part of his trial. A man, who appears to be in charge, tells Joseph that he is late. Joseph is surprised. He was told to come at a certain time, and he arrived exactly then. But the man simply states that the court does not operate on strict schedules. Joseph does not understand this, but he decides not to argue. Joseph then tries to defend himself. He says he does not know why he was arrested and that he has done nothing wrong. But as he speaks, he realizes that no one in the room is really listening to him. Some people are whispering to each other. Others seem distracted. It is as if his words do not matter. Still, he continues to argue, trying to make sense of the situation. At one point, he starts to feel angry. He tells them that this entire process is ridiculous. He has committed no crime, and yet he is being treated like a criminal. The officials, however, do not react much. They simply tell him that his case is being processed, and he will be contacted again. There is no verdict, no decision. Just a vague statement that the trial is continuing. Joseph leaves the place feeling frustrated. He wanted answers, but he received none. He wanted justice, but he found only confusion. The people in that room acted as if this was normal, as if such trials happened all the time. But to Joseph, none of this made sense. He wonders if there is a way to end this, to prove his innocence. But how can he fight something he does not even understand? After leaving the strange courtroom, Joseph K. feels lost. The experience has left him with more questions than answers. He had expected to meet real judges, hear the charges against him, and defend himself properly, but instead, he found himself in a small, crowded room where no one seemed to care about justice. No one explained anything, and no one gave him any real chance to prove his innocence. The days pass, and Joseph tries to focus on his work at the bank. But he cannot stop thinking about the trial. It is like a shadow following him everywhere. He begins to feel a strange pressure, an invisible force that reminds him constantly that he is accused of something he does not even know. Every time he receives a letter or a message, his heart beats faster, thinking it might be another summons from the court. One day, he decides that he cannot just wait for things to happen. He needs to take control. He needs to find a way to defend himself, even if no one tells him what he has done wrong. He remembers that he has an uncle who is well-connected and might know how to handle legal matters. Hoping for some guidance, Joseph visits him. His uncle, who is an older man with a strong personality, listens to Joseph's story and immediately becomes worried. He tells Joseph that this is serious, that a trial, even one as strange as this, can ruin a person's life. He insists that Joseph must act quickly and find a good lawyer to help him. Joseph is not sure if a lawyer can really help when the entire process makes no sense, but he agrees to meet someone his uncle knows. The next day, his uncle takes him to visit a lawyer named Herhold. The lawyer is an old, sick man who spends most of his time in bed. Despite his weakness, he seems to know a lot about the court system. He tells Joseph that his case is not unusual. Many people go through the same confusing process, and most of them never fully understand what is happening. The court, he explains, works in a way that outsiders cannot comprehend. It has its own rules, its own methods, and once someone is caught in its grip, it is almost impossible to escape. Joseph listens carefully, trying to understand. He asks the lawyer how he can defend himself, but the answer is not comforting. The lawyer tells him that the court does not function like a normal legal system. There is no clear path to victory. There are no set laws that one can use to argue their case. Everything is based on secret decisions made by unknown officials. The only thing Joseph can do is try to influence those officials, convince them to look at his case favorably. But how? The lawyer offers to represent Joseph, saying that he has contacts within the court and might be able to help. Joseph is not sure if he trusts him. The man seems weak and passive, as if he has already accepted that the court is too powerful to fight against directly. But Joseph also knows that he cannot do this alone. He agrees to let the lawyer handle his case, at least for now. After leaving the lawyer's house, Joseph's uncle seems frustrated. He tells Joseph that he should not rely too much on this lawyer, that he should take action himself. But Joseph does not know what else to do. He feels trapped. The trial is like a maze with no exit and no one, not even his lawyer, seems to know the way out. The next few weeks are filled with waiting. Joseph hopes for some progress, but nothing happens. He begins to lose patience. He tries to visit the lawyer again, but every time, he is made to wait. And when he finally meets him, the lawyer speaks in vague terms, never giving him a clear answer about what is happening with his case. It is as if the lawyer himself is stuck in the same endless process, unable to move forward. At the same time, Joseph starts noticing something strange. The trial is affecting his daily life in unexpected ways. People around him seem to know about it. His colleagues at work whisper about him. Even though no one openly accuses him of anything, he feels their judgment. It is as if the trial is not just happening in the court, but also in the world around him. He starts to wonder, has he already been marked as guilty, even without a verdict? Joseph realizes that he cannot simply wait for others to solve this problem for him. If he wants to escape this nightmare, he must take action himself. But where should he begin? The court is invisible yet everywhere, and every step he takes seems to lead him deeper into its grip. Joseph K. begins to feel the weight of the trial in every part of his life. No one from the court has given him any instructions. Yet he knows the process is continuing somewhere, beyond his sight. He imagines unknown officials discussing his case, making secret decisions about his future. This thought haunts him. He does not know what they are saying, what evidence they are looking at, or what judgment they might already have in mind. At work, he notices that his colleagues act differently around him. Some avoid him, others look at him with curiosity, as if they know something but will not say it. No one asks him directly about the trial, but he feels their silent judgment. He wonders if his arrest has been reported somewhere, if people are whispering behind his back. Even his boss seems colder than before, as if he is reconsidering Joseph's position at the bank. Joseph wants to tell everyone that he is innocent, that there is no real case against him, but he knows it would be pointless. He himself does not even know what the case is about. Frustrated, he decides to take control. He cannot keep waiting for the lawyer to act. If the court is going to judge him, he must at least understand how it works. He starts asking questions, trying to find out more about the mysterious system that has accused him. This leads him to a man named Titorelli, a painter who has connections to the court. Titorelli's studio is in a poor part of the city. In a small, hot room filled with unfinished paintings, the place feels suffocating. But Joseph ignores the discomfort. He needs answers. Titorelli welcomes him, acting as if he already knows why Joseph is there. It seems that many people in Joseph's situation come looking for the painter's help. Titorelli explains that he paints portraits of judges, and because of this, he hears many secrets about the court. He does not work for the court directly, but he knows how it operates. Joseph asks him the most important question. How can he win his case? Titorelli shakes his head. No one truly wins in this court, he says. There are only 3 possible outcomes. The first is actual acquittal, where the court declares Joseph completely innocent, but this never happens. The court never fully clears anyone. The second is apparent acquittal, where Joseph might be released for a while, but the trial could start again at any time, sometimes even years later. The third is prolongation, where the case is never concluded, but it also never reaches a final verdict. The accused remains in a state of uncertainty, always under the court's watch but never sentenced. Joseph cannot believe what he is hearing. He asks Titorelli if there is a way to escape the system completely, but the painter only smiles. There is no escape, he says. Once a case starts, it never truly ends. The court is everywhere, and its decisions are beyond logic. Even the judges themselves do not have full control. The entire system works in secrecy, with unknown forces directing it. Joseph feels trapped. He had come here looking for a solution, but instead, he has learned that there is no way out. Even if he fights, even if he tries to prove his innocence, the court will never officially declare him free. If he runs away, the case will follow him. If he does nothing, the process will continue endlessly. The court does not need a reason to keep him inside its system. Titorelli offers one piece of advice. If Joseph wants to avoid punishment, he must stay involved in the case. He must keep filing petitions, making requests, meeting officials, and keeping the process alive. As long as the case remains active, the court will not make a final decision. But the moment Joseph stops fighting, the court may take action against him. Joseph leaves the studio feeling worse than before. He had hoped to find a way to clear his name, but now he understands that this is not a normal trial. There are no laws that can protect him, no clear steps he can take. He must play the court's game, even if he does not understand its rules. Otherwise, he risks disappearing into its machinery forever. His mind is filled with doubt. Should he follow the lawyer's slow, useless strategy? Should he keep trying to influence the court through people like Titorelli? Or should he take a risk and confront the system directly? No matter which path he chooses, he knows one thing for sure. His life is no longer his own. The trial is not just happening in secret courts and hidden offices. It is happening everywhere. It has entered his workplace, his home, and his thoughts. He is no longer just Joseph K., a bank employee. He is Joseph K., the accused, and he does not know if he will ever be free again. Joseph K. tries to return to his normal life, but the trial has changed everything. The knowledge that he is being judged by an invisible system makes him restless. His daily routines feel pointless. His work no longer matters the way it used to. His interactions with people have also changed. He starts to see suspicion in their eyes, or at least he imagines it. Every conversation feels like a test, as if people are waiting for him to say the wrong thing. He wonders if the court is listening, if spies are watching his every move. Even in his own home, he does not feel safe. One evening, he visits his lawyer, Huld, hoping for good news. Instead, he finds the lawyer lying in bed, weak and sick. Huld barely has the energy to speak, but he still talks about the trial as if he is in control. He tells Joseph that his case is progressing in the usual way, that he has made some important connections with the court officials, but he does not say anything specific about what progress has been made. It is all vague, just promises and empty reassurances. Joseph feels frustrated. He realizes that the lawyer is doing nothing except keeping the process alive, just as Titorelli had advised. This is not a defense. It is a strategy of delay. While at the lawyer's house, Joseph meets a new character, Lenny, the lawyer's nurse. She is young and attractive, and she seems strangely interested in Joseph. She flirts with him openly, touching him and speaking in a playful manner. Joseph is confused by her behavior. He is here to discuss his trial. Yet this woman is acting as if she has known him forever. Lenny tells him that she has helped many accused men like him. She claims to understand his situation better than he does. She even suggests that his case is hopeless, but she does not seem worried about it. Instead, she tells him that she likes men who are facing trial. Joseph does not know how to respond. He is both disturbed and intrigued by Lenny. She makes him feel special, but at the same time, he senses that she is part of the court's world. She speaks too confidently about the system, as if she knows secrets that he does not. It makes him wonder, who is she really working for? Is she just a nurse, or does she have connections inside the court? Is she trying to help him, or is she just another distraction meant to keep him under control? Despite these doubts, Joseph allows himself to be drawn to her. He follows her into another room, leaving the lawyer behind. Lenny kisses him, and for a moment he forgets about the trial. But this brief escape does not last. As soon as he leaves the lawyer's house, the weight of his situation returns. He is still trapped. He still has no answers. And now, he feels even more entangled in the strange world of the court. Days pass, and Joseph becomes more impatient. He decides to take another step in understanding his trial. He visits a court official named Block, a businessman who has been fighting his own case for years. Block is a strange, nervous man who has completely devoted his life to his trial. He has hired multiple lawyers, spends all his money on legal fees, and spends his nights studying court documents. Despite all this, he is still no closer to a resolution. His case is still active, still unfinished, just like Joseph's. Seeing Block is like looking into a possible future. If Joseph does not escape this process, he too might end up like this. A man who is no longer a businessman, no longer a free person, but just an accused individual waiting endlessly for a verdict that will never come. Block has no control over his own life anymore. He exists only for his case. Joseph realizes with horror that this is what the court does to people. It does not just punish them, it absorbs them, it turns them into shadows of their former selves, forcing them to spend all their time and energy on a trial that has no end. This realization terrifies Joseph, but it also fills him with anger. He does not want to become like Block. He does not want to waste his life waiting for a judgment that may never come. He begins to feel that he must do something drastic, that he cannot simply follow the usual process like everyone else. But what can he do? The court is too big, too powerful, and too mysterious. He still does not even know who his judges are. He does not know what crime he is being accused of. He is fighting an invisible enemy, one that controls everything but reveals nothing. As he leaves Block's house, Joseph feels more determined than ever. He knows that if he keeps following the path that has been laid out for him, he will never be free. He must find another way, even if it means taking a risk. But deep down, he also knows the truth. This is not just about the trial anymore. The court is not just in the hidden offices and dusty corridors where officials work in secrecy. The court is inside him now. It has changed the way he thinks, the way he sees the world. No matter what he does next, he can never return to the life he had before. The trial has already consumed him. Joseph K. continues to feel the weight of the trial pressing down on him. He becomes more isolated from his colleagues at work, more distracted during meetings, and more impatient with the people around him. The trial is always on his mind, even when he tries to focus on other things. He feels as if invisible hands are pulling him deeper into the system, and no matter what he does, he cannot escape. One day, he receives an unexpected invitation. The court has arranged for him to meet with a priest at a cathedral. Joseph is not a religious man, but he feels that this meeting might help him understand his case better. He arrives at the cathedral, expecting to find a quiet and empty space, but instead, the atmosphere is heavy and oppressive. The large, dark building feels like a symbol of his own situation. Vast, confusing, and filled with unanswered questions. The priest is waiting for him. He is dressed in simple robes and stands under a dim light, his face partly hidden by the shadows. Joseph approaches him, unsure of what to expect. The priest looks at him for a long moment before speaking. When he finally does, his words are not comforting. He does not offer Joseph guidance or hope. Instead, he tells him that his case is going badly. Joseph is shocked. He did not expect the priest to know anything about his trial. The fact that he does only confirms how deep the court's influence runs. Even inside this sacred space, the court's power is present. He asks the priest how he knows about his case, but the priest does not answer directly. Instead, he begins to tell a parable, a story that at first seems unrelated, but soon reveals itself to be deeply connected to Joseph's situation. The story is called Before the Law. It is about a man from the countryside who seeks access to the law. He arrives at a great gate, where a doorkeeper stands guard. The man asks to be let in, but the doorkeeper refuses, saying that it is not possible at the moment. The man waits, He sits by the gate for years, always hoping that one day he will be allowed to enter. He tries to bribe the doorkeeper, but each time he is told that he may enter only when the time is right. The years pass and the man grows old. As he is dying, he asks the doorkeeper why no one else has ever tried to enter the gate. The doorkeeper smiles and tells him that this gate was made only for him. Then he closes it forever. Joseph listens carefully, but he does not understand the meaning of the story at first. He asks the priest to explain. The priest tells him that many interpretations exist. Some say the man was foolish to wait, that he should have tried to enter on his own. Others say that the doorkeeper was simply following his duty, and that the man's mistake was believing that he could ever be allowed in. There is no single answer. The story, like the trial itself, is full of uncertainty. Joseph grows frustrated. He wants a clear explanation, something that will help him fight his case. But the priest only gives him more questions. He realizes that the court operates in the same way. It never gives direct answers, never explains the rules. It simply makes people wait like the man in the parable. It keeps them trapped in uncertainty, hoping for justice that will never come. The conversation with the priest leaves Joseph feeling more lost than before. He thought that coming here would bring him closer to understanding his trial, but instead, he now feels that the entire system is designed to be unknowable. The court does not want him to find answers. It wants him to remain confused, powerless, and obedient. As he leaves the cathedral, the city around him feels different. The buildings seem taller, the streets more narrow. It is as if the world itself has changed. But in reality, it is not the world that has changed. It is Joseph. His view of everything has been transformed by his trial. Nothing feels real anymore. Nothing feels certain. Even his own existence feels like a question without an answer. He begins to realize something terrible. The trial is not just a process he has been forced into. It is something deeper, something that has become part of him. The court does not only exist in the dark offices where his case is being handled. It is everywhere, in every conversation, in every moment of doubt, in every place where power is exercised without reason. And now it is inside him too. He can never truly escape it because it has already taken hold of his mind. For the first time, Joseph feels a deep fear. Not just of the court, but of himself. What if he has already lost? What if the trial has already destroyed him? The thought lingers in his mind, and he cannot push it away. He has reached a point where the trial is no longer just about guilt or innocence. It is something much larger, something that goes beyond the legal system. It is about the way the world works, the way power controls people, and the way individuals become trapped in systems they can never understand. And most terrifying of all, he begins to suspect that there may never have been a way out. Joseph K. leaves the cathedral feeling unsettled. The conversation with the priest keeps repeating in his mind. He tries to shake it off, to tell himself that it was just another strange encounter, like so many others since the trial began. But deep down, he knows this was different. The parable of the man before the law was not just a story. It was a reflection of his own life. He had spent so much time trying to understand the trial, trying to argue his case, trying to find a way to defend himself. But what if, like the man at the gate, he had been waiting for something that would never come? What if the entire process was designed to keep him in this state of uncertainty forever? Joseph returns to his office and tries to go about his normal work, but he finds it nearly impossible to concentrate. His colleagues sense something is wrong. They whisper about him behind his back, and some avoid him altogether. Even the manager, who once respected Joseph, now looks at him with doubt, as if he is somehow untrustworthy. The trial is not just affecting his mind. It is changing the way others see him. One day, an important client visits the bank. Joseph is supposed to assist with the meeting, but his thoughts are elsewhere. As the client speaks, Joseph finds himself staring at the man's hands, watching how they move, how they rest on the table. He realizes he is barely listening. When the client asks him a direct question, he stumbles over his words. His manager steps in quickly, taking control of the conversation. Joseph feels humiliated. This is not who he was before the trial. He was once sharp, confident, and respected. Now, he is a man who cannot even follow a simple business discussion. After the meeting, his manager calls him into the office. At first, Joseph expects to be scolded for his poor performance. Instead, the manager speaks in a calm and careful voice. He asks Joseph if everything is all right, if he is struggling with something personal. Joseph immediately understands what this means. The rumors of his trial have reached the higher levels of the bank. His case is no longer a secret. He assures his manager that everything is under control, but he can see the doubt in the man's eyes. His position at the bank is slipping away. As Joseph leaves the office, he feels an overwhelming sense of helplessness. He has been trying so hard to fight back against the trial, to maintain his innocence, to prove that he is not guilty. But now it does not seem to matter whether he is guilty or not. The trial has already damaged his reputation. It has taken away his confidence. It has made others see him as a man who is struggling, a man who is failing, and that is just as dangerous as being found guilty in court. The next evening, Joseph decides to visit one of his few remaining allies, Titorelli, the painter. He remembers that the court officials had spoken of the man, saying that he was familiar with how the system worked. Maybe Titorelli can offer him some advice, a strategy to help him win his case. Joseph walks through the city, the streets feeling narrower and darker than before. It is as if the entire world has become a maze, twisting and turning, leading him deeper into confusion. Titorelli's studio is in a poor neighborhood, up a narrow staircase in an old, crumbling building. When Joseph arrives, he finds the door slightly open. Inside, the air is thick with the smell of paint and dust. Canvases are stacked against the walls, many of them unfinished. The room is small, almost claustrophobic. Titorelli himself is a thin man with a nervous energy, his clothes stained with paint. Joseph explains his situation, and the painter listens carefully. Then, Titorelli begins to speak. He tells Joseph that he has known many people who have been caught in trials like his. They all thought they could prove their innocence. They all believed that if they argued well enough, if they presented enough evidence, they could clear their names. But the court does not work that way. The system is not designed for justice. It is designed to keep people inside it, to trap them in endless procedures, to make them spend their lives trying to reach an outcome that never comes. Joseph refuses to accept this. He asks Titorelli if there is any way to win. The painter shakes his head. There is no true acquittal, he explains. There are only 3 possible outcomes. The first is actual acquittal, where the court drops the charges completely and the accused is set free. But Titorelli has never heard of this happening. It is a myth, something people hope for but never see. The second is apparent acquittal, where the accused is declared innocent, but the case is never truly closed. At any moment, the trial can begin again, the charges can be reinstated, and the accused is thrown back into the process. This kind of acquittal is an illusion. The court never truly lets go of a case. The third outcome is endless postponement, where the accused keeps the trial going indefinitely through various appeals and legal maneuvers. The case is never resolved, but as long as it is still in process, the accused remains free. But this is not really freedom. It means living in constant fear, always waiting for the court's next move, never knowing when the trial might suddenly move forward. Joseph listens in silence. These are his only choices. There is no real escape, no way to actually be free. Titorelli nods. That is how the court works. It is not about innocence or guilt. It is about control. It is about making people live in uncertainty, about keeping them under pressure, about ensuring that they are always waiting, always afraid. Joseph feels sick. He thought that coming here would help him, but now he sees the truth. The court does not need to prove anything against him. It does not need to convict him. It only needs to keep him trapped, to make him spend his life in the shadow of the trial. That is the real punishment. Titorelli offers Joseph a strange option. He can help him get an apparent acquittal, but it will not be real freedom. Or he can help him arrange for endless postponement, which will keep him out of immediate danger but will never let him rest. Joseph feels cornered. He cannot accept either of these fates. But what other choice does he have? He leaves the studio feeling weaker than ever. The city seems even more lifeless, the streets more confusing. He wonders if he will ever find his way out of this nightmare. But deep inside, he begins to suspect the answer. There may be no way out at all. Joseph K. walks back from Titorelli's studio with heavy steps. The painter's words haunt him. There is no real acquittal. There is no real escape. The only choices are an illusion of freedom or a life spent endlessly postponing the inevitable. The trial will never truly end, and the court will always have control over him. He tries to tell himself that Titorelli might be wrong, that there is still a way out, but deep inside, doubt has taken hold of him. Days pass, and Joseph finds himself withdrawing from everything. His work at the bank suffers. He moves through the office like a shadow, no longer as respected or confident as before. His colleagues keep their distance. and his manager watches him with growing suspicion. He wonders if they know about his trial. Perhaps the court has spread its influence into every part of his life. Perhaps everyone already sees him as a guilty man, even though he has done nothing wrong. One evening, he receives a message from his uncle. The man is worried about Joseph and insists on meeting him. When Joseph arrives, his uncle's face is tense with concern. He asks Joseph what has been happening, why he has changed so much. Joseph hesitates. How can he explain something that even he does not fully understand? How can he describe a trial that has no clear charges, no clear judge, no clear end? Finally, he tells his uncle about the trial, about the strange court, the endless procedures, the conversations with the lawyer and the painter. He expects his uncle to be shocked, but instead, the man grows angry. He scolds Joseph for not taking the case seriously enough. The court is dangerous, he says, and Joseph has wasted too much time. He should have acted sooner, hired a better lawyer, made stronger connections. Joseph is confused. He has been trying to fight this case. But no matter what he does, the situation only becomes more complicated. His uncle takes him to see a well-known lawyer, a man named Huld. The lawyer is old and sickly, confined to his bed, but he has deep connections within the court. His room is dark and filled with legal papers, the air thick with the smell of medicine. Joseph introduces himself and explains his case, hoping that this man can finally offer some real help. But as the conversation continues, Joseph starts to feel uneasy. The lawyer speaks in long, complicated sentences, talking more about the nature of the court than about how to win the case. He tells Joseph that many people have been in his situation, that the process is always difficult, that patience is necessary. He hints that he has influence with certain judges, but he never promises a clear solution. Instead, he talks about how cases can take years, how decisions are made in secret, how even the most well-connected people can never be sure of their fate. Joseph listens in frustration. He does not want to hear about how difficult the system is. He wants to know how to escape it. But the lawyer keeps talking, explaining how cases move through different levels of the court, how verdicts are sometimes delayed for reasons no one understands, how even lawyers themselves are often left in the dark. As the conversation drags on, Joseph realizes something disturbing. The lawyer does not seem interested in solving his case. He seems more interested in keeping Joseph dependent on him, making sure that he remains a client for a long time. The lawyer's power comes from the court's confusion, from the fact that no one truly understands how the system works. If the trial were to end quickly, he would have no more influence. Joseph begins to suspect that this is how the entire system works. The court does not aim to punish people in a straightforward way. Instead, it keeps them trapped, forcing them to rely on officials, lawyers, and advisors who promise help but never truly deliver it. It is not a trial in the normal sense. It is a slow, endless process designed to wear people down, to make them spend their lives trying to prove something that does not even need proof. As the lawyer speaks, another figure enters the room. A young woman named Lenny, who helps take care of the lawyer. She is different from the others Joseph has met in connection with the court. She seems amused by Joseph's case, as if she has seen many others like him before. She flirts with him, tells him that she likes accused men, that they have a certain charm. Joseph is taken aback. To her, the trial is not a serious matter. It is just part of life, something that happens to people, something that cannot be escaped. Joseph feels a strange mix of attraction and frustration. Lenny represents another side of the system, those who have accepted it, who live inside it without questioning it. She does not see the trial as a problem. She sees it as something normal, even interesting. Joseph realizes that many people around him seem to think this way. They do not fight against the court. They simply live within its rules, never questioning why things are the way they are. After leaving the lawyer's house, Joseph feels more lost than ever. Instead of finding a solution, he has discovered another layer of the system. The lawyer does not offer a way out. He only offers more waiting, more delays, more uncertainty. The court's power does not come from punishment. It comes from making people feel powerless, from making them believe that they must keep following the process, even if it leads nowhere. Joseph wonders if he has already lost, not because he has been declared guilty, but because he has been drawn into the court's logic, forced to play a game that has no end. He had hoped to fight the trial. Now, he is starting to wonder if the trial has already consumed him. Joseph K. leaves the lawyer's house with a heavy heart. He had hoped to find guidance, but instead, he discovered yet another layer of the court's strange and confusing system. The lawyer, Huld, spoke in endless riddles, offering no real solutions. Lenny, the lawyer's caretaker, treated the trial as something amusing, something that simply existed rather than something to be fought. The entire experience left Joseph feeling more trapped than ever. He starts to wonder if seeking help was a mistake. Every person he meets seems to be a part of the system in some way. The lawyer, the painter Titorelli, even the court officials. All of them seem to accept the court's power as something natural, something beyond question. The more Joseph tries to resist, the more entangled he becomes. At the bank, Joseph's troubles grow worse. His work begins to suffer as he spends more and more time worrying about his case. His superiors notice his distraction. Clients seem less eager to meet with him. There is a quiet change in how people treat him. Small signs that his reputation is fading. He begins to suspect that word of his trial has spread. Even if no one speaks of it openly, he can feel the weight of their silent judgment. One day, an important client visits the bank. He is a powerful businessman, and Joseph is assigned to assist him. The meeting takes place in a grand office, with Joseph doing his best to appear professional. But before long, the client begins talking about the court, not about Joseph's case directly, but about the court in general, as if testing him. He speaks in vague terms, hinting that he knows more than he is saying. Joseph listens carefully, unsure of how to respond. Then, unexpectedly, the client suggests that Joseph visit a priest who works as a prison chaplain. This priest, he says, may be able to give him insight into the court's ways. Joseph is startled. What does a priest have to do with the court? But he knows by now that the court's influence stretches everywhere. If this priest has some knowledge, perhaps he can offer something valuable. Some key to understanding this trial, some path forward. Joseph follows the client's advice and visits the cathedral where the priest works. It is a vast, empty place, its high ceilings making Joseph feel small. Shadows stretch across the walls. The silence is deep, almost unsettling. Joseph is not a religious man, but at this point, he is willing to listen to anyone who might have answers. He waits, and after some time, the priest appears. He is not like the other people Joseph has met in connection with the court. He does not speak in circles or hint at secret influence. Instead, he tells Joseph a story. The story is about a man who comes to a great door marked, "The Law." A guard stands in front of the door, preventing the man from entering. The man asks if he can go inside, but the guard tells him that he cannot. Not yet. The man waits, hoping that one day he will be allowed in. He sits by the door for years, growing old as he watches others pass by. He begs, he argues. He tries to find a way to get through, but the guard never lets him in. Finally, just before the man dies, he asks one last question. Why, if this door was meant for me, did no one else ever try to enter it? The guard looks down at him and says, "This door was made only for you, and now I am going to close it." Joseph listens carefully. At first, he does not understand the meaning of the story. What does this have to do with his trial? What is the priest trying to tell him? The priest explains that the story is open to many interpretations. Some believe that the man should have tried harder to push past the guard. Others believe that the man was doomed from the start, that the system was never meant to let him through. Some think the guard was lying, that there was never a door at all, only the illusion of one. Joseph struggles to grasp the meaning. Is the court like the door? Is his trial nothing more than an endless waiting game? A trap that he can never escape? Has he already wasted too much time, just like the man in the story? He asks the priest for answers, but the priest only shakes his head. He tells Joseph that it is not for him to explain the court's ways. The court is beyond human understanding. It is something that simply exists, something that no one can truly fight. Joseph feels anger rising inside him. He has spent so much time searching for help, only to be met with more confusion. Everyone seems to know something about the court, yet no one can tell him how to escape it. There are no clear rules, no clear judgments. Only an endless process designed to keep him trapped. As Joseph leaves the cathedral, he realizes something terrifying. He is not just a man on trial. He is part of something larger, something beyond his control. The court is not just a legal system. It is a force, a machine that continues moving forward no matter what he does. And no matter how hard he tries to understand it, he may never find a way out. After leaving the cathedral, Joseph K. feels more lost than ever. The story told by the priest lingers in his mind, filling him with doubt and fear. He had spent so much time believing that he could fight his case, that he could find some logical way to prove his innocence. But now, he is beginning to question whether there was ever a way to win. The court is not a normal system of justice. It does not follow the rules he once understood. Instead, It is like a great, invisible force that moves without explanation, without reason, and without mercy. As the days pass, Joseph continues his life at the bank, but his work feels meaningless. He goes through the motions, meeting clients, signing documents, but everything seems distant, unimportant. His thoughts are always on the trial. It has become a shadow over his existence, something he cannot escape. Even when he tries to focus on his job, his mind drifts back to the strange encounters he has had. The guards who arrested him without charge, the old lawyer who spoke in riddles, the painter who described the endless levels of the court, and now the priest who offered a story instead of guidance. He begins to wonder if the trial itself is changing him. When he first heard of his arrest, he had been full of energy and determination. He had believed in justice, in logic, in his ability to clear his name. But now he feels drained, as if the fight has been taken out of him. He does not even know what he is fighting anymore. Is he trying to prove his innocence? Or is he just trying to understand the system that is controlling his life? One evening, as he walks home from work, Joseph suddenly notices two men following him. He cannot tell who they are, but their presence makes him uneasy. He quickens his pace, turning down different streets, but the men remain behind him, always at a distance. It is clear that they are watching him, but they make no attempt to speak. Joseph wonders if they are officials from the court. Have they come to bring him to another hearing? Or are they simply making sure he does not try to escape? By the time Joseph reaches his apartment, the men are gone, but the fear remains. He starts to realize that he is being watched all the time, even when he does not notice it. The court is always present, always observing, always waiting. It does not need to send him letters or summon him to a courtroom. It is simply there, shaping his life in ways he cannot understand. The next morning, Joseph wakes up feeling exhausted. He goes to the bank as usual, but everything feels strange. His coworkers seem to avoid him. His manager speaks to him less. It is as if people sense something different about him, something they do not want to be involved in. Joseph wonders if they know about the trial. Has the court spoken to them? Has his reputation already been destroyed? As he sits at his desk, a letter arrives for him. He hesitates before opening it, half expecting it to be another summons from the court. But when he unfolds the paper, there are only a few short lines. The message is simple. He must prepare himself. A decision has been made. Joseph stares at the letter, his heart pounding. What decision? No one ever told him about a final verdict. He had never even been given a proper chance to defend himself. Was there a trial happening without him? Was he already guilty in the eyes of the court? He tries to stay calm, but the more he thinks about it, the more the fear builds. He does not know what will happen next, but he senses that his time is running out. The court has been patient, allowing him to struggle, to search for answers, to exhaust himself in the process. But now the game is coming to an end. Something is about to happen, and Joseph is powerless to stop it. Joseph K. spends the next few days in a state of quiet dread. The letter he received gave him no details, no instructions, only a vague warning that a decision had been made. But what decision? Was he sentenced already? Was he supposed to do something? Or was this just another trick? Another way for the court to keep him uncertain and afraid? He tries to act as if nothing is wrong. He goes to the bank, sits at his desk, and meets with clients. But his mind is elsewhere. He watches the people around him, wondering if they know something he does not. Have they heard whispers about his case? Do they look at him differently now? Are they waiting for him to be taken away? That night, Joseph tries to convince himself that he is overthinking. Maybe the letter meant nothing. Maybe he still has time to fight back. He tells himself that he should go see his uncle again, or perhaps visit the painter Titorelli for advice. But deep down, he knows the truth. There is no more help to find. Everyone he has met so far has only confused him, made things worse. The lawyer, the painter, the court officials. None of them ever gave him real answers. They only showed him how endless and hopeless this system was. As he paces his room, trying to think of a plan, there is a knock on his door. It is late, too late for visitors. His first thought is that it must be the court. They have finally come for him. He hesitates before opening the door, his hands shaking. Two men stand outside. They are well-dressed, quiet, and serious. They do not introduce themselves. They do not give him any papers or explanations. They simply say, "It is time." Joseph does not resist. Perhaps it is because he is too tired. Perhaps it is because, after everything, he no longer sees a point in fighting. The court has already won. He follows the men out into the dark streets, not knowing where they are taking him. They walk through the city in silence. Joseph notices how empty everything feels. The windows of the buildings are dark. The streets are quiet. It is as if the world itself has turned away from him, as if he no longer belongs here. He wonders if anyone is watching from the shadows, if there are eyes hidden behind curtains, waiting to see what will happen to him. After a long walk, they arrive at a small, abandoned quarry at the edge of town. Joseph has never been here before, but something about the place feels familiar. Maybe because this is how he always imagined his trial would end. Not in a courtroom, not in front of a judge, but somewhere hidden, somewhere forgotten. The two men stand beside him, saying nothing. They do not need to explain why they are here. Joseph already knows. He feels a sudden urge to protest, to demand justice one last time. But he stops himself. Would anyone hear him? Would anyone care? He has spent so much time arguing, searching for answers, and what has it given him? Nothing. The trial was never about finding the truth. It was never about justice. It was something much bigger, something he never understood. One of the men takes out a knife. Joseph stiffens, but he does not run. He knows that this was always going to happen. Maybe it had already happened long ago, the moment he was arrested. Everything since then had only been a delay, a slow journey to this exact place. The men hesitate for a moment, as if waiting for Joseph to say something. Maybe they expect him to beg. Maybe they want him to cry out, to plead for his life. But he does not. Instead, he looks up at the sky. He sees the stars shining above him, cold and distant. He feels a strange sense of peace, as if the struggle is finally over. And then the knife comes down. Joseph K. lies on the cold ground, his body still and his breath fading. He does not cry out. He does not fight. He simply stares at the sky above him, his mind slipping between confusion and clarity. The men beside him do not speak. They have done their duty. There is nothing left to say. As Joseph's thoughts drift, he tries to understand everything that has happened to him. How did it come to this? Where did it all begin? He remembers the morning of his arrest, how he was taken from his comfortable life and thrown into a world of uncertainty. He had done nothing wrong, at least nothing he could name, but none of that had mattered. The trial had moved forward, pushing him deeper into a system he could never escape. He thinks of all the people he met along the way. The guards who first arrested him, the bank employees who watched him with silent curiosity, the court officials who spoke in riddles. He thinks of the lawyer, the businessman, the painter Titorelli, all of them giving him advice that led nowhere. He remembers the priest in the cathedral, telling him the story of the man at the gate. That story had haunted him, but only now does he understand its meaning. The man had spent his whole life waiting for permission to enter the law, but the gate was meant only for him. He could have walked through at any time, but he never did, and so the gate was closed forever. Was that Joseph's mistake? Had he been waiting for something that was never going to come? Had he spent too much time looking for answers instead of accepting the truth? The court did not need proof, did not need guilt. The trial was not about justice. It was something far bigger, something beyond him. His trial had never been about finding a verdict. It had been about submission, about control, about making him believe he was guilty even if he was not. He sees that now, but it is too late. Joseph K. had always believed he was in control of his life. He had worked hard, built a respectable career, lived in a good apartment. He had power, influence. But all of that had meant nothing the moment the court entered his life. It stripped him of everything. His dignity, his confidence, his freedom, and now, in these final moments, he realizes the most terrifying truth of all. The court did not just take away his life. It made him accept his own end. It made him believe this was the only way it could have ended. One of the men leans down, checking to see if Joseph is still alive. He does not move, but he is still conscious. He feels their hands on him, adjusting his position. They are not cruel. They are not violent. They are only following orders like everyone else in this system. Joseph K. wants to speak, to say something before the end. He does not know what. Maybe he wants to laugh at the absurdity of it all. Maybe he wants to scream that this is unfair. Or maybe he just wants to say that he understands now, that he finally sees the truth. But no words come. The knife is raised again. The hands hold him down. He closes his eyes. And then, in a voice that is barely more than a whisper, he says his final words. Like a dog. The knife comes down, and everything goes dark. Joseph K.'s final moments leave behind a powerful message, but to truly understand them, we must look back at everything that led to this tragic end. His journey through the trial was not just a legal process. It was a slow, crushing realization that he had no control over his fate. Every step he took, every person he met, only pushed him further into confusion and helplessness. At the beginning, Joseph believed he could fight the charges against him. He was confident, even arrogant. He thought his intelligence and social status would protect him. But as time passed, he saw that none of that mattered. The court did not care about his arguments or his proof of innocence. It did not follow any rules that he understood. He was trapped in a system that did not explain itself, that did not reveal its purpose, and that did not allow him any real defense. One of the most terrifying aspects of the trial was how ordinary people accepted it. Joseph expected others to be outraged on his behalf. He thought his friends, his colleagues, or even strangers would question the injustice of his situation. But instead, they either ignored his suffering or gave him advice that only led him deeper into the maze of the court. Even his lawyer, who was supposed to help him, seemed more concerned with playing the game of the court than actually defending him. First, Joseph resisted. He tried to act as if the trial was just a mistake, something that would soon be corrected. But as time passed, he started to change. He became obsessed with understanding the court, trying to find ways to beat it. The more he searched for answers, the more lost he became. His job suffered, his relationships weakened, and his sense of self crumbled. The strong, confident man at the start of the story was slowly replaced by someone desperate, exhausted, and full of doubt. This change did not happen all at once. It was slow, creeping into every part of his life. The court never physically imprisoned him, but it did something worse. It made him imprison himself. He could still go to work, still walk the streets, still live in his apartment, but none of it felt real anymore. Everything was overshadowed by the invisible weight of the trial. One of the most disturbing moments in Joseph's journey was when he met the painter, Titorelli. The painter explained to him that no one was ever truly free from the court. There were only three possible outcomes: actual acquittal, apparent acquittal, and indefinite postponement. But Titorelli made it clear. Actual acquittal was almost impossible. No one had ever truly been declared innocent. The other two options simply kept the accused in a constant state of waiting, never truly free, never truly condemned. This conversation was a turning point for Joseph. Until then, he had still believed that if he just found the right argument, the right person, or the right strategy, he could clear his name. But after speaking with Titorelli, he understood the terrible truth. The trial was never meant to end. The system was designed to keep him trapped forever. There was no escape, no final verdict that would set him free. From this point on, Joseph's resistance weakened. He still fought in small ways, but the fight was different now. He no longer believed he could win. He argued, not because he thought he could clear his name, but because he did not know what else to do. The court had drained him of his strength, his confidence, and his hope. In the end, when the two men came for him, he did not resist. He still felt anger, still felt fear, but he had already been defeated long before that night. His execution was only the final step in a process that had begun the moment he was arrested. The trial had not just taken his life, it had taken everything that made him who he was. Joseph K's story is a terrifying look at how power and bureaucracy can destroy a person without ever needing to justify themselves. His fate was not decided in a courtroom with a clear judge and jury. It was decided in secret by a system that never explained its rules. His crime was never named, his guilt never proven, and yet he still lost everything. And perhaps the most frightening part of his story is that he came to accept it. At the start, he fought against the absurdity of the court. But by the end, he no longer even asked why. He simply let it happen. The moment Joseph K. accepted his fate was not sudden. It was a slow, painful journey that had been shaping him from the very beginning. He had started as a man full of confidence, a man who believed in logic, reason, and fairness. But by the end, he had been transformed into someone who barely recognized himself. The world around him had not changed. His job still existed. People still went about their daily lives, and the court remained as mysterious as ever. But something inside Joseph had broken. The energy, the fight, the belief in his own ability to control his life had been drained from him. Piece by piece. The court never physically imprisoned him. It did not lock him away in a cell or put him in chains, but it had done something far worse. It had made him question everything, until even his own thoughts were no longer his own. This was the true horror of the trial. It was not about proving guilt or innocence, because those concepts did not seem to matter. The process itself was the punishment, the endless confusion, the false hopes, the waiting, the fear. These were the tools of the court, and they worked far more effectively than any prison walls. Throughout his journey, Joseph met many people who were caught in the same system. Some were like him, still fighting, still hoping for a way out. Others had already given up. They had learned to live with the trial, to accept it as part of their lives. Some even served the court willingly, helping to maintain the system that had trapped them. It was as if the court did not need force to control people. It only needed time. The longer someone was caught in the process, the more they lost themselves to it. One of the most striking examples of this was Joseph's lawyer. At first, Joseph believed the lawyer could help him, that he had knowledge and influence that would make a difference. But over time, he saw the truth. The lawyer was not fighting the court, he was part of it. He did not try to prove Joseph's innocence or find a way to end the trial. Instead, he played the game, following the court's strange, unwritten rules, always trying to gain small advantages, but never questioning the system itself. Joseph realized that this was how most people survived in the court's world. They did not challenge it because they knew that was impossible. Instead, they tried to exist within it, hoping to delay their fate for as long as possible. They accepted the trial as an unavoidable part of life, like a disease that could never be cured but only managed. At one point, Joseph tried to take control of his case. He fired his lawyer, believing that he could defend himself better. He thought that if he just explained things clearly, if he just spoke to the right person, he could find justice. But this decision only made things worse. Without the lawyer, he had no guidance, no access to the hidden pathways of the court. He found himself even more lost than before. One of the most disturbing lessons Joseph learned was that the court was everywhere. It was not just in the dark offices, not just in the dusty attics where the hearings took place. It was in people's homes, in their workplaces, in their conversations. It was in the way people behaved, in the way they accepted the trial as something normal. He realized that even those who were not directly on trial were still affected by the system. They lived in fear of it, shaped their lives around it, avoided talking about it. The court was not just a legal institution. It was a presence that controlled everything, even the thoughts of those who lived under it. As time passed, Joseph found it harder and harder to separate himself from the trial. In the beginning, he had tried to keep his normal life going. He still went to work, still attended social gatherings, still acted as if everything was fine. But as the trial dragged on, those parts of his life faded away. Work no longer seemed important. Conversations with friends felt empty. His world became smaller and smaller, until there was nothing left except the court. There were moments when he still felt anger, still felt the desire to resist, but those moments became fewer. He became tired, not just physically but mentally, emotionally. The trial was like a heavy weight pressing down on him, making every movement difficult, every thought slow. In the final days before his execution, he no longer tried to fight. He no longer searched for answers. He simply waited, as if he had already been sentenced long ago. And in many ways he had been. The trial was never about reaching a verdict. It was about breaking him down, making him accept his own destruction. Even at the end, when the two men came for him, there was no explanation. No final judgment was read. No official declaration of guilt. There was only the quiet, methodical process of carrying out the sentence. He did not know who the men were, did not know if they had any real authority. But it did not matter. The system had won. He had been worn down until he no longer had the strength to resist. The last thing he saw was a knife raised above him, and in that final moment, as his life slipped away, his last words were not a cry for help, not a protest, not a demand for justice. He only whispered a question that had haunted him since the beginning, like a dog. And then, it was over. Joseph K's story does not end with his final breath. His trial had lasted for a year. But in truth, it had never really been about him. It was something much larger, something that had existed long before him and would continue long after. The court was not a place, not a group of people, not a single authority that could be questioned or reasoned with. It was an idea, a force, something that spread like an invisible web through the world. Even after Joseph K. was gone, nothing changed. The court continued. More trials began. More people found themselves caught in its grip. Just as confused and helpless as he had been, the cycle repeated itself endlessly, and no one could say why. This is what makes his story so terrifying. It is not just about one man's downfall. It is about a system that exists beyond understanding, beyond resistance. Joseph K. had done nothing wrong, yet he was made to suffer. He had tried to find logic in the process, but there was none. He had hoped for justice, but justice never came. The men who carried out his execution were not monsters. They were not filled with anger or cruelty. They simply did their job, as if they had no choice. And in a way, maybe they didn't. That is the most frightening part of all. The system did not rely on individuals being evil or corrupt. It relied on their obedience, on their belief that they had no power to change things. But was there ever a way out? Could Joseph K. have escaped? Could he have done something differently? That is the question that lingers long after his death. Some might say that his mistake was in resisting. Maybe if he had accepted his trial from the beginning, if he had submitted completely, he might have been spared. Others might say he was doomed no matter what, that the court never needed a reason to punish someone. But perhaps the most unsettling possibility is that there was never an answer, that the system was designed not to give answers, but to create questions that could never be solved, that it existed only to keep people trapped in fear, always waiting, always uncertain. And so Joseph K.'s story does not truly end. His voice fades, his body disappears, but the trial continues. It continues in the silent offices, in the dark hallways, in the unread documents piled high in unknown rooms. It continues in the whispers of those too afraid to speak, in the careful steps of those who hope to avoid its gaze. And somewhere, another man wakes up one morning to find that he has been accused. He does not know why. He does not know what will happen. But he knows, deep inside, that his life will never be the same again. And so, it begins again. That's the end of the story. If you enjoyed the story, please like, share, and subscribe for more exciting tales. Check out our other videos and share your thoughts in the comments. Stay tuned for the next adventure. Thanks for watching.